Hello. About 1 year ago, I get my copy of Stargard Solstice, a game about German offensive attempt at the Pomerania at the beginning of 1945, released by the Swedish company Three Crown Games. It was my first game by this company, and I found it very interesting. First, because it covered a rather obscure operation. I don't think that there is much of games about Operation Solstice, or as the German says, Operation Sonnenwende. And this was also interesting game because of the mechanics. First, it is pretty easy when it comes to the rules, but it uses activation mechanics, which isn't that popular among World War II games. This is a much more popular mechanics for any 19th or 18th century games, or even older. But judging on my own experience, most of the World War II games makers prefer I go, you go mechanics. So it was pretty cool game. My only complaint was that it had only one scenario. I prefer games with multiple scenarios, but about 1 year later, Polish company Taktyka and Strategia released the new issue of their magazine with 2 smaller scenarios for this game as well. This magazine was also released in English, so if you like, you can get it, and you will get 2 more scenarios for Stargard Solstice. But a year happened, and I get another game from Three Crown Games, and this is Tolling of the Bell. And it shares some similarities with Stargard Solstice, because it covers another rather obscure German operation from the end of the war. It covers Operation Spring Awakening. And what was Operation Spring Awakening? This was surely the last German offensive of the World War II. It happened in April 1945. Yes, April. The moment where German forces were defending desperately at all fronts. They suffered enormous losses. Many German units already surrendered to the Allies or Soviets, and it was pretty clear that the end of the Third Reich is getting close. Even so, Germans tried yet another offensive operation. Actually, I think that one of the major problems of Hitler's command was that he only believed that attacking might change his situation. So, if you will check the last months of the war, you will see that despite being outgunned, outnumbered, and having constant problems with supplies, Germans are still trying to attack on both fronts. On the Western Front, they start attack in Ardennes, and soon after they start their Operation Nordwind. At the Eastern Front, they do Operation Solstice that I mentioned before, and then they launch a couple of the offensives at Hungary under the codename Conrad. There was Conrad I, Conrad II, Conrad III, to recapture besieged Budapest. And even after all these failures and all these losses, at the April of 1945, they try yet another offensive operation at Hungary. At this point, Budapest was taken by Soviets, and Hitler decides that he wants to get Budapest back, and also he wants to push Soviets away of the oil fields that were nearby, because it was the last reserve of oil for Germans. And that's how this operation started. It was a desperate attack. Germans used their best units, mostly from the 6th Armored Army of SS. These units were already withdrawn from the Western Front, where they fought in Ardennes. It took them a very short time to rebuild their forces, and they had to attack again. This attack was a kind of suicidal attack, because not only of the Soviet advantage, because at this certain point of the front, Soviets didn't have a big advantage of units, but there was another major problem, which was terrain. It was a spring, and you may know what spring, early spring, means at the Eastern Front. Yes, a lot of mud, a lot of problems with moving your units, especially your tanks, a lot of logistic issues, and you can guess how it ended. Germans tried to attack. They pushed Soviets back in the first 2 days, but Soviets quickly called for reinforcements. They gathered more troops and they pushed the Germans back onto their initial positions. Germans suffered heavy losses, and Hitler was that angry on his best units, especially on the SS units, that he said that they are not worthy to be his men anymore, and he commanded them to remove all these marks with his name from their uniforms. It was just an empty gesture, because none of these soldiers used these marks anymore because of the camouflage issues, but it made their commanders very angry, and they didn't even dare to read this order loud in front of the soldiers. So, pretty interesting operation, and definitely less known. It is not as popular among the wargames makers as, let's say, Ardennes or Arnhem. So I think it is cool that we get some game about this operation. It is released in Ziploc, just like Stargard Solstice, and somehow I like it. You may ask why? The answer is pretty clear. Because of the space on the board, in my room. Well, thanks to the Ziploc, I can take this game and put it into the other box with some other game. For this game, for example, I use Dead of Winter by GMT. I keep this game and Stargard Solstice inside this box, along with original game. So it helps me to save some space on my shelves. And as for the game itself, let's take a look on it. Here we have counters, another counter sheet, and I would like to remove everything carefully to not damage anything. So, what do we have here? Here we have two sheets with all the tables. In the previous game, some of these things, like random event tables, were printed in the rulebook. Now all of them are on this on these player aids, each for one player. Some of these things are pretty small, and you might need magnifying glass to read them. But all in all, it is good to have everything on the one sheet. It makes definitely game easier. Next, we have a rulebook. Let's start with this stuff, and we will go to the counters and board later. It is 16 pages long, so it's almost as much long as the Stargard Solstice game, and there are 12 pages of actual rules, and the rest is a setup and some other stuff. So this is definitely not a big game or hard to learn. As far as I know, most of the rules are the same like in the Stargard Solstice. I had a chance to get these rules earlier, before I've been making a translation of this game into the Polish, because it was sold in Poland as well, so it needed Polish rulebook. And there are some differences, of course. This is not a copy-paste rulebook, because there are many differences, especially when it comes to the movement. You can tell that by what I said before, that maneuvering during this operation was a complicated task for Germans because of the terrain and because of the weather, and all this stuff is included in the rules. But many rules are the same, and all the basic stuff is mostly the same. So if you played Stargard Solstice or any other games, because this is 5th game of the series. I know there was Stargard Solstice, but there were 3 more games I never had a chance to play. So if you played any of these games, I think you will have no problems with getting rules of the tolling of the bell. And there is, just like Stargard Solstice, it has only one scenario. Here we have a setup for this scenario. I think it is a bit better than the previous setup. I mean, setup is setup, but it's a bit clearer than the Stargard Solstice. Here we have some optional rules and random events. Okay, so if you don't like games that are too complicated, these games should be perfectly fine for you because they are pretty easy to learn. The only problem might be that they are a bit long. These games are not short ones. If you prefer games that you can set up and play one evening, nope. This is not the game you would like to get. So this is quite important for if you are going to choose your game. And now here we have a counter. Here is some errata, and there is one difference between this and Stargard Solstice. As you can see, these aren't that shiny. They are matte. While Stargard Solstice had glossy counters, while these are all matte. I think this is better, especially if you have some lamp pointed on your table when you are playing and you want to take some photos or record your video. Then these counters will look much better on such photo or video than these glossy ones. As you can see, there is a lot of colors here. Well, there are mostly German and Soviet units, but there are also some Yugoslavian partisans. There are some Romanians, I believe. And some Hungarians as well, of course, since we are fighting on Hungary. So there is some variety of troops. I like it. I like when my board is colorful with many different counters. Most of the armored units have icon of tanks, while all the other units have NATO markers, and of course air units have silhouettes of the aircraft. Here we have some markers as well, but there isn't much markers in this game actually. Here, and here. That's all. So not much of markers. And now let's check the board. I like the way this company makes their boards. They make them look very map-like. I know this sounds strange because most of the wargames boards are actually maps, but I just like how they look. I like their graphic design. They look pretty nice and aesthetic for me, of course. And you can see that this board is oriented. Here we have north, and here we have south. I cannot move my camera like this to show you this from south to north. Instead, I have to move it from east to west. But I think you can see everything. Here we have boxes, and here we have some more boxes. But most of the board is just the terrain. And you can tell the difference between this game and Stargard Solstice now, since there was much more clear terrain in the Stargard Solstice, but here we have much more woods, hills. There is a huge Balaton lake here, one of the biggest lakes in this part of Europe. There are some marshes around, so terrain is definitely not that easy to maneuver and to attack like it was at Pomerania. So that's when it comes to the map. It is not very big. I would say it is medium when it comes to the site. Of course, this is not that small like, for example, Advanced Squad Leader maps, but it is also not that big like some monster games. Alright, so that's what we have inside the board. Inside the box, or rather inside the ziplock actually. And here we have some notice. We had a misprint on the independent counters for both sides. To more easily identify them as independent units, we had made a white field behind their unit ID. This field was suddenly missing when we received the counters from the print shop. It has led to German Independent Unit 6 Polizei, missing its ID totally. Okay, so we will have to read it and remember about it when we are going to play this game. And here we have some errata for the rules. Alright, so I don't think this is something big problem, but you have to remember to read it before you will start playing. Okay, so that's all when it comes to this game. Oh, I forgot about the back of this player 8, when we have some historical introduction to this game and some basic informations. Rules are developed from the Stargard Solstice Day. Oh, just like I said before, if you play Stargard Solstice, you will get this game without much problems. So, that's all. I like the fact that we get something about Spring Awakening game. It is not something very popular among wargames, and I hope I will be able to make some video about this game. I plan to do something about Stargard Solstice before. I made something in Polish, but I think this game needs some good video in English about the rules. And that's all for today. Thank you for watching and see you next time.